Innocent black teen jailed for crime he didn't commit. And then truth revealed few years later. Welcome to my YouTube channel. No Justice Nation for such amazing stories. Let's dive right in. They said he was guilty. They said he looked like the suspect. They said the evidence was clear. But what they really meant was he was a young black teen in the wrong place at the wrong time. And for that, they stole his youth. 17-year-old Marcus Hayes had dreams like any teenager. College, a scholarship, a future. But one cold evening in the fall of 2006, those dreams were shattered in a heartbeat by a system that never saw his humanity, just his skin. It started like any other night in Southside Chicago. Marcus had just left his part-time job at a local grocery store. He was saving money to help his mother pay bills and apply to college. A straight-A student with no record, no violence, and no reason to be suspected of anything. But when police responded to a 911 call about a robbery 3 blocks away, Marcus was walking home, hoodie up, earbuds in, unaware that his life was about to change forever. According to the officer's later testimony, Marcus matched the description. That vague, poisonous phrase has destroyed too many black lives to count. They said the suspect was a black male, mid to late teens, about 5 feet 9 inches, wearing dark clothing. That could have been any number of boys in that neighborhood. But they chose Marcus, without asking questions, without any concrete evidence. 2 squad cars swerved and pinned him against the wall. He was thrown to the ground, cuffed, and loaded into a police cruiser before he could even speak his name. His mother, Sharon Hayes, didn't even know her son had been taken until she got a call from the police station an hour later. By then, the officers were already preparing the paperwork to charge Marcus with armed robbery and assault with a deadly weapon. Marcus begged them to check his alibi. He had been working a shift at the store from 3:30 p.m. to 9:15 p.m. His manager could confirm it. There were time cards. There were surveillance cameras. But they ignored all of that. What mattered to them was that a frightened, elderly witness pointed at Marcus during a poorly conducted photo lineup and said, "That's him, I think." They built a case around that weak ID and ignored everything else. Surveillance footage from the grocery store mysteriously went missing. The time cards were unavailable due to a computer glitch. The store manager, initially cooperative, later claimed he couldn't remember whether Marcus had been at work that night. No DNA, no fingerprints, no physical evidence tying Marcus to the crime scene. Just one scared, misled eyewitness. But that was enough. Marcus was indicted, denied bail, and shipped to a juvenile detention center to await trial. The community was outraged, but powerless. His mother fought like hell to get attention, but no one wanted to listen to a working-class black woman screaming that her son had been set up. The prosecutors moved quickly. They offered a plea deal, 10 years in prison for a confession. Marcus refused. He was innocent. He thought the truth would protect him. He was wrong. The trial lasted only 4 days. The prosecution paraded the elderly witness on the stand and built a narrative around fear. They told the jury that Marcus was part of a growing gang problem, that he fit the profile of youth violence in the area. They never explained why there was no physical evidence. They never explained why the store security footage was unavailable. They never had to. The jury, mostly white and suburban, deliberated for less than 2 hours. Marcus was found guilty on all counts. He was 17, sentenced to 25 years without parole. When the verdict was read, Sharon Hayes collapsed in the courtroom. Her son, her baby boy, who had never even been in detention at school, was now being hauled away in shackles for a crime he did not commit, and the system moved on. In prison, Marcus was treated like a statistic, another black number in an overpopulated cell. He tried to appeal, but every attempt was denied. He wrote letters to lawyers, civil rights groups, newspapers, anyone who might care. Most never wrote back. A few sent polite rejections. One even said, "There's nothing we can do unless new evidence emerges." He spent his 18th birthday behind bars, then his 19th, then his 20th. Time moved, but his life didn't. Meanwhile, the real perpetrator remained free. No one continued the investigation. No one seemed to care if justice had been served. As long as the paperwork was clean and the conviction secure, the state had done its job. But what the state didn't count on was Marcus surviving long enough to be heard. In 2014, 8 years after his conviction, a new public defender named Teresa Caldwell stumbled across Marcus's file while reviewing past cases. Something about it didn't sit right with her. The timeline was shaky. The lack of physical evidence was concerning, and the missing surveillance footage raised red flags. She decided to dig deeper. She tracked down the store manager, who now lived in another city. Under questioning, and outside the pressure of courtroom, he admitted he had been pressured by police not to testify in Marcus's favor. They made it clear, he said, if I opened my mouth, they'd start looking into my own business. I was scared. I kept quiet. I regret that every day. Teresa obtained sworn affidavits and began to piece together Marcus's real timeline. She submitted a formal request to reopen the case. But even then, it wasn't easy. The court system resisted. The prosecution claimed there was no new evidence of significance. It took nearly 3 more years, 3 more birthdays behind bars, before a judge finally agreed to review the case. And what they found was damning. The surveillance footage hadn't been lost. It had been deliberately withheld. An IT technician at the precinct had flagged the footage as contradictory to the state's case and was quietly removed from evidence logs. When a subpoena forced the city to produce backup server records, the footage reappeared, and it showed Marcus clocking out at the grocery store minutes after the robbery supposedly took place, over 3 blocks away. There it was, proof of innocence. Not a guess, not a maybe, proof. Marcus sat silently in the courtroom as the judge reviewed the evidence. It had been 11 years since he last saw freedom. The courtroom was packed. His mother held her breath. Civil rights attorneys, journalists, and community leaders filled the benches. When the judge finally spoke, his voice was measured but clear. This court finds that Marcus Hayes was wrongfully convicted due to prosecutorial misconduct and suppression of exculpatory evidence. This conviction is vacated, effective immediately. Marcus's knees buckled. His mother screamed and fell into his arms. The courtroom erupted. Reporters rushed forward. Cameras flashed. But for Marcus, everything slowed down. The noise faded. The walls disappeared. For the first time in over a decade, he was no longer a number, no longer a case file. He was free. Freedom, they say, is priceless. But for Marcus Hayes, freedom came at the cost of youth, family, opportunity, and peace. 11 years stolen. 11 birthdays behind concrete walls. 11 winters without a mother's hug. He walked out of the Cook County Courthouse not as a free man, but as a living example of how deeply broken the system really was. But even in that moment of vindication, the wounds remained. Reporters swarmed him, microphones in his face, cameras rolling. How does it feel to be free? They asked. But how do you answer that when you were never supposed to be in prison in the first place? How do you explain the numbness in your bones? The time lost with your little sister who grew up without you? The father who passed away while you were locked up and never got to hear your voice one last time? Marcus's mother held his hand tightly as they walked through the sea of cameras. She looked older now. The worry, the tears, the years had etched themselves into her face. But she stood tall, because her son was coming home. But freedom wasn't simple. It wasn't a return to normal, because normal no longer existed. Marcus had no ID, no social security card, no savings, no job history, nothing to his name but a box of legal documents and a state-issued apology that said, in effect, oops. And that apology? It didn't include an admission of guilt from the officers who arrested him. It didn't include consequences for the prosecutor who suppressed evidence. It didn't include jail time for anyone who participated in destroying his life. Marcus was just another ex-Neary in America, another black man proven innocent long after the damage had already been done. He moved in with his mother and began therapy almost immediately. Nightmares plagued him. Loud noises triggered panic. Crowds made him flinch. He'd pace the room at night, unable to sleep, haunted by the sound of prison. Doors slamming, guards yelling, the cries of other men in cells. He said once, They took my body, but they almost took my mind too. But Marcus was not one to be broken forever. Within 6 months of his release, he began to speak at schools, youth centers, and churches. Not as a victim, but as a warning. He told young people what the system could do to you, even when you do everything right. He told mothers to keep records, to always know their children's whereabouts, to teach them how to talk to police even when it's unfair. He became a voice for those still inside, those who hadn't been as lucky as him. Word spread. Civil rights attorneys picked up his case for compensation. In the state of Illinois, wrongfully convicted individuals could receive up to $85,000 per year of imprisonment. That sounded like a lot. But what dollar amount equals the price of a lost childhood? What number matches the pain of missing funerals, graduations, weddings? The state offered a settlement. $946,000. Before taxes. Marcus accepted it. But not because he thought it was fair. He accepted it because it gave him tools to rebuild. He used it to start the Marcus Hayes Justice Foundation, aimed at helping other wrongfully convicted youth get access to lawyers, mental health support, and reentry resources. But even as he rebuilt, the wounds of betrayal bled underneath. The prosecutors who mishandled his case faced no charges. The officers who arrested him still had their badges. One had even been promoted. When asked by a journalist whether they regretted their role in Marcus's imprisonment, one officer said, "We did what we thought was right at the time. Hindsight is 20/20. Hindsight? That's what they called it? Marcus called it robbery of his time, his innocence, his life. By 2020, Marcus had become a nationally recognized advocate. He was featured on CNN, MSNBC, and in the New York Times. Oprah's team reached out. He appeared on podcasts, documentaries, and spoke at the National Innocence Network Conference. But for every success he gained, he never forgot those still inside. He kept a binder full of letters from men and women who saw his story and reached out, pleading for help. Some claimed innocence. Others begged for a second chance. And Marcus tried to answer every single one. One case, in particular, struck him deeply. A 16-year-old named Terrence from Mississippi, who had been locked up for being at the scene of a robbery he didn't commit. No gun, no stolen goods, just guilt by association. Marcus flew down, met with his family, and got involved. It reminded him of himself, a life about to be lost to a system that feeds on assumptions. In the process, Marcus began pushing for legislative reform. He testified before state legislatures, demanding mandatory body camera use, stricter rules on evidence handling, and criminal consequences for prosecutors who withhold evidence. He said, "If I had stolen something, I'd be in jail. But these people stole my life, and they get to go home to dinner with their families. That's not justice. That's hypocrisy." Some lawmakers listened. Bills were introduced in multiple states. One, named the Hayes Act, proposed automatic reviews of juvenile convictions where physical evidence was absent and eyewitness testimony was the sole basis of conviction. It faced pushback, especially from police unions, but it started conversations. That's what Marcus had become, a spark. But behind all the advocacy, the speeches, and the appearances, Marcus still carried the pain. He rarely talked about the nights he spent in solitary, or the friends he watched die inside prison walls, or the first time he saw snow fall through a prison window and thought it looked like hope. In 2023, Marcus published a memoir titled Time I'll Never Get Back. It was raw, powerful, and honest. He didn't hold back. He named the officers, the prosecutor, the judge. He described the roaches, the strip searches, the nights he cried into his pillow until it soaked. He told America what prison really felt like when you're innocent and forgotten. The book hit bestseller lists in weeks. But Marcus didn't care about fame. He cared about accountability. He donated a portion of the book's proceeds to fund DNA testing in old cases. He launched a scholarship for teens from marginalized neighborhoods who wanted to become lawyers and public defenders. He said, "If we want justice, we can't just wait for it. We have to build it." By 2025, Marcus Hayes was no longer just a survivor of injustice. He was a symbol of resistance, a reminder that even when the system tries to bury you, the truth still has roots. But he never forgot the moment it all began. That night, that hoodie, that walk home. He still visits that street sometimes. He stands where he was arrested, looks around, watches the cars drive by, and wonders how many other innocent boys have walked that same street and never made a home. Because in this country, it's not enough to be innocent. You have to prove you are. As Marcus Hayes' story reached national headlines and classrooms alike, it didn't just echo across the news. It struck the very core of what it meant to be young, black, and presumed guilty in America. His case had been one of hundreds, maybe thousands, hidden behind bureaucracy, buried beneath false testimonies, and ignored by a public desensitized to injustice. But now, Marcus stood at the intersection of suffering and activism, no longer just a statistic, but a movement. Marcus knew that if the system had made one mistake with him, it had made many more with others. And while his own fight for justice had ended in freedom, for most, the cage remained. So he shifted his focus from telling his story to fighting for theirs. He launched a project called the Freedom Lab, a collaboration between legal advocates, data analysts, and formerly incarcerated individuals, all focused on digging into wrongful convictions. The mission was simple: comb through old case files, identify wrongful convictions where evidence was weak or tainted, and push for reviews. With Marcus's name attached, the project began receiving grants and donations. Celebrities lent their platforms. Civil rights lawyers offered pro bono work. And slowly, stories began to emerge. One was of a man in Ohio, sentenced to life for a shooting that ballistic evidence later disproved. Another, a woman in Louisiana convicted on coerced testimony. In less than a year, the Freedom Lab helped reopen 6 cases. 2 of those men walked free. Marcus traveled the country, meeting with families of the wrongfully imprisoned. He cried with mothers who hadn't hugged their sons in over a decade. He held the hands of daughters who had only ever spoken to their fathers through plexiglass. He promised them, "We won't stop, not until every innocent person is free." But not everyone was cheering for Marcus. In fact, as his influence grew, so did resistance. Former prosecutors whose careers were built on convictions he now challenged began publicly criticizing him. They accused him of stirring distrust in the judicial system. Police unions issued statements accusing his foundation of slandering honest officers and undermining law enforcement. Local media outlets sympathetic to law and order narratives called him a man obsessed with revenge. But Marcus never responded with rage. He responded with facts. He showed them court transcripts. He showed them records of suppressed evidence. He showed them affidavits and testimonies from people who had been silenced. Every time they tried to silence him, he came back louder and smarter. He said in one interview, "This isn't about hate. This is about repair. The truth is, I don't want to burn the system down. I want to rebuild in a way where no kid like I was ever has to prove they're innocent just because they're black and poor." At just 34 years old, Marcus was now advising legislative working groups in multiple states. He was fighting for automatic public defenders to be assigned to all juveniles within 1 hour of arrest. He pushed for bans on the use of single eyewitness testimony as sole grounds for conviction. He lobbied for laws requiring independent oversight of police evidence storage. And in some states, these reforms were actually being written into law. But for Marcus, it always came back to people. Not papers, not policy. People. He met with teens in juvenile facilities, warning them not just about the law, but about how easily the system could twist reality. Don't give them a single reason to take your future, he said. And if they still take it, don't stop fighting until you get it back. One of those teens, a 15-year-old named Jamal, later told a reporter that Marcus's speech changed his life. "He made me believe I wasn't just a number," Jamal said. "He made me believe I still had a future." But Marcus never saw himself as a hero. He said in a podcast, "I'm not extraordinary. I'm just loud. And I'm lucky I survived long enough to tell you what they did to me." Even as his profile grew, Marcus kept a low personal life. He didn't flaunt his money. He bought his mother a house, enrolled in law school part-time, and mentored kids after class. He never forgot the taste of prison food. He never forgot the smell of metal and fear. He never forgot the night He was arrested for being the wrong color, in the wrong place at the wrong time. And then, 10 years after his release, something unexpected happened. The woman who had identified him, the elderly witness who had pointed him out in the photo lineup, reached out. She was now in her late 70s and battling a terminal illness. Through her lawyer, she requested to meet with Marcus. She said she needed to confess something. Marcus was hesitant. The woman's false ID had been the main reason he was imprisoned. But after thinking it over, he agreed. They met in a quiet hospice room outside of Chicago. She was frail, pale but alert. She took his hand and said through tears, I don't know if you can ever forgive me, but I need to tell you what really happened. And what she told him was devastating. She admitted that during the original police lineup, officers had pressured her to choose someone. They showed her Marcus's photo twice. They said, we think it's this one, he was near the area. She said she felt afraid, confused, and unsure, but the way they talked made it feel like she had to point him out. I wasn't sure, she said, but they made it feel like I had to choose. It was coercion, intimidation, a quiet manipulation of justice. Marcus didn't cry. He just nodded. He had suspected this all along. But now he had confirmation. Before she passed, the woman recorded a sworn statement. Marcus later included it in his next testimony before Congress, pushing for a national ban on suggestive police lineups. As time passed, Marcus's name became synonymous with innocence and redemption. But still, he said in interviews, I would trade all of this in a second to get those 11 years back. When people asked him how he endured it, how he stayed sane, he always said the same thing. Because my mother never gave up on me, and because I refused to die silent. Today, Marcus Hayes continues to be one of the most powerful voices for criminal justice reform in the United States. His foundation has helped overturn 17 wrongful convictions. His book is used in law schools. His testimony has shaped policy. But more than anything, he reminds us that justice isn't just about guilt or innocence. It's about who gets believed, who gets heard, who gets protected, and who gets left behind. And as long as one innocent person still sits behind bars, Marcus Hayes will keep fighting. Because this fight isn't about the past. It's about the future. Like my video and subscribe my channel for more daily videos.